Mark Fletcher. I've wanted to do this interview with you for a long time. So pleased that you are sitting here with me today. You were elected as a Conservative MP for Bolsover. You beat Dennis Skinner. I want to talk to you about growing up, because you grew up in a household where you were subject to and witness to domestic abuse. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a brilliant mum. She was my best friend. She was amazing. She was sort of 5'2" and Scottish and had a very fiery temper. But unfortunately, my mum sort of married another guy when I was sort of around 7, something like that. And he was not a great guy. He was someone who I think he really resented mine and my mum's close relationship. I think he really resented me, sort of looking back. But there were a lot of things that at the time felt normal, but actually really weren't. So he used to sort of take me for drives, which my mum thought was a nice thing, you know, sort of father-son bonding time kind of thing. But actually, he just hit me in the car. And you know, there were similar things sort of throughout. He used to sort of spy on me in the house and stuff. It was very strange. And then it sort of exploded. My mum found out he was having an affair. I think I was 11 years old. And he confronted her. And I remember sort of he beat her up downstairs. I was sort of upstairs trying to do my geography coursework, or homework rather. And he came upstairs. I can't quite repeat what the words he used because they're not broadcastable, but he said, "This is all your fault. You little," and insert word, which I didn't know what the word meant at the time. But it's one of those things where my mum was amazingly strong, but she didn't cope with that period at all well because she was very proud. She'd been a financial advisor in a very male world in the 80s and 90s. She was very strong-willed, and I think she felt very unempowered. And for me, I ended up she had a bit of a breakdown, is the honest thing, and she didn't want to press charges. And I was looking after my mum. I wasn't at school. I was trying to look after her.
Are you an only child, Mark?
I am an only child. Well, I'm either an only child or the oldest of 5, depending how you want to see it. My dad has remarried and they've got 4 kids. But in that household, I was an only child. And so I missed a lot of school in year 7. In the end, I ended up in hospital because my digestive system gave up. A lot of my body sort of gave up. But I don't know. I do a talk for year 9s usually in my schools. And I always say, you're taught when you're that age to focus on everything that you're good at. Everything, you know, if you're bright, if you're good at sports, if you're good at music. But you also need to recognize the things that aren't good in your life, the things that you struggle with, because so often they're the things that actually empower you. They're the things that actually make you want to make a difference. And I'm a bit of a zealot for my job. I'm a bit of a crusader. And I use the example of what happened with my stepdad because, you know, I never expected to talk about it. And I talked about it in the House of Commons, and we helped to get children recognised as victims in the domestic abuse bill, which I'm really proud of. But I use that as an example to kids who might not be in the best position themselves and thinking, maybe I can go and change the world in some way as well.
Did you tell anyone at the time?
No, I didn't. I mean, my godparents, who are amazing, they knew. But I think they were the only people that knew otherwise. My dad didn't know for years. I never told my dad, which I regret in lots of ways, but I'm also glad because I think my dad would have probably acted as a northern man would act. But yeah, no, I didn't tell anyone.
You said in that speech, which you made, it was the first speech you made after your election, you said that these are experiences which shape you. To quote you, let me say that it casts a lifelong shadow on those children who are affected. Can you tell me how?
Because I think you grow up and try and understand the world. You're always learning. I mean, to some extent, I'm 37 now and I'm still learning about how the world works, and it's different worlds that I'm in now in Westminster. But I think you look for what's normal, and when something like that happens, it's not normal. But going for a drive and getting beaten up was normal. I've talked a lot actually about how I've always struggled with aggressive men and sort of male culture, macho culture, because it's, to me, if it goes to a certain edge, if there's a certain level of conflict, which to others might just be banter, to me, I'm 10 years old and scared again in my head, because that's what I associate it with. That's what I associate strong men with. And that's a really difficult thing. And actually, perhaps it's good that I sort of recognise it, but it's one of those things that you don't escape.
How did you escape the situation? What happened? How did this man leave your life and your mum's life?
Well, after the night I just mentioned, there was, I think, 12 months of sort of legal arguments. My mum and my stepdad were business partners, but there were lots of sort of disputes and bits and pieces. But I never saw him after that night. I've never spoken to him since that night. And that I'm actually quite relieved about. So in a sense, it ended at the moment of greatest tension. But it wasn't something that I've never been keen to find him again. Weirdly, I got a letter at my new house, which is however many houses along, a couple of months ago, asking if I knew where he was, because an old company were looking for him. And it was the first time anyone had referenced him by name in however many years. It was very strange.
You talked about shame as well as terror. I didn't get the shame thing. Explain that to me.
Because I think part of it is that I couldn't protect my mum. I think, you feel as a man that you want to be able to do something. I think there's a shame I think most victims would recognise an element of shame, of like being other and almost feeling guilty for that, of almost feeling guilty about talking about it in a sense, because you just want to sort of get on with your life now. I'm very happy with my life now, but you have this sort of echo of the past that comes up every now and then, sometimes in a positive way. I did an amazing thing. I went out to see the Royal Marines in Norway a few weeks ago, and it was what you would expect to be a hyper male culture. And actually was anything but. It was one of the most tolerant places. I actually was quite emotional about how amazing it was to be surrounded by so many men who actually were, the very best of Britain. But the other side of that is sometimes you just feel like you wish it hadn't happened to you. You wish it wasn't you that had it.
The issue of domestic abuse should not be seen as a women's issue, and men must speak out. It's your words. There's not that much evidence of this, is there? I mean, you are in a minority.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, and there are some slightly difficult conversations to have. I think when you speak to veterans charities, when you speak to domestic abuse charities, they will often recognise that sometimes women use allegations of domestic abuse against men to give themselves an advantage, and equally you get a situation in which a lot of men are terrified to talk about it. And that it's not just sort of women on men, it's same-sex relationships as well. I get a little bit distressed when we morph sort of violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, because I think they are actually different things. There's obviously a huge overlap, and I'm not sort of naive. But I think it's really important that male victims don't feel like they're othered and that they don't have a place to sort of talk about it. And it is, you're right, there's not a lot of, percentage-wise, in terms of recorded crimes, there aren't that many of them, but B, there aren't very many people who speak up about it. And I think that makes it more difficult.
And you've sort of alluded to, if you don't like this phrase, then correct it, toxic masculinity. Is there any government policy that can do anything about that?
No, that's a societal thing. And I think that's something that, it's weird, if you look at younger generations, I'm not sure they have it anywhere near as pronounced as they did. When I visit my schools in my constituency now, I feel it's very different. If I look at the generation of staffers in Parliament, that I used to be a staffer in Parliament, I think they're very different. I think there's been a real evolution of what being a 21st century man is, for lack of a better phrase. But undoubtedly there are pockets of it, and I think it used to be sort of schools and sports were where it was the worst. I think schools have done, a lot of schools have done a really good job of evolving that. But it's also, there are moments when you see a group of lads and you think, you know where this is going. But for the most part, I think generationally there has been a huge shift. Final
question. You were one of the Conservative MPs at the Carlton Club, that's the Central London Members Club. You had to intervene in a very serious situation involving the former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher. That night arguably sealed Boris Johnson's fate as Prime Minister. Can you tell me what happened that night?
I have a lifelong habit of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm not able to say very much. Yes, I was there. I am a witness to an investigation that is ongoing, and therefore I don't want to prejudice that investigation at all. And so I can't say much more than that, really.
Fair enough. Any idea when it will conclude?
I would hope sooner rather than later, but I can't say for certain.
Thank you for talking to me. I expected it to be a great interview. I think it takes courage, but it's courage for a purpose. And I think that purpose is a really noble one. I'm sorry for what you and your mum endured, but hopefully your words will prevent other children and women going through the same. Mark Fletcher, thank you.